The sky outside my kitchen window had just begun to turn the color of pewter, that in-between shade of day where the sun hasn't quite decided whether to rise or retreat. I was standing by the sink, rinsing out my teacup when the knock came, not on the door, as it should have, but lightly tentatively against the window pane. I turned slowly, heart already tugging in that familiar way. The way it does when you know what's coming won't feel right. It was Alan. My son stood on the porch in a navy jacket, hair combed back, holding a manila folder close to his chest like it might blow away. Behind him, the faint outline of Cynthia, his wife, hovered like a shadow, arms crossed. Her long beige coat too elegant for a woman who never wanted to walk through my front yard unless absolutely necessary. I dried my hands on the same dish towel I'd been using for 10 years, folded it over the oven handle, and made my way to the door. "Morning, Mom," Alan said, too quickly, as if he were rehearsing something. I opened the door but didn't step aside to let them in. "Not yet. What's wrong?" I asked, eyeing the folder. My voice was calm, but inside, something sharp and cold was beginning to take shape. Cynthia gave one of her polished smiles, the kind that never reached her eyes. "Nothing's wrong. We just have some good news." Alan nodded and finally stepped inside without waiting for my invitation, brushing past me with a kiss on the cheek that felt like it belonged to a stranger. "I made tea," I offered, out of habit more than hospitality. "Earl Grey." "No time," Cynthia said brightly. "We've got an early lunch with the Johnsons. This won't take long." I led them to the dining table, the same one where Alan used to do his homework after school. His little legs dangling from the chair, feet never quite touching the floor. Now he sat in that same spot, taller, broader, but not necessarily stronger. "This," he said, placing the folder on the table, "is the final paperwork. I transferred the house into your name. Like we discussed, everything's official." He slid the folder toward me with a grin that seemed forced. Cynthia placed a gentle, possessive hand on his shoulder, like she was reminding him that she was there, that she had guided this, approved it. I didn't touch the folder. Instead, I studied his face. His eyes were the same hazel as his father's, but something in them had changed. The boy who used to cry over broken Lego castles had grown into a man who now flinched when confronted by silence. "When did we discuss this?" I asked, my voice even. Alan blinked. "The house. You said you wanted it in your name before the end of the year for tax purposes." "I said I wanted to review the deed myself," I replied. "You said you'd send me a draft." Cynthia's smile thinned. "Judith, it's already done. Everything is in your favor." Alan worked hard to make sure it all went through smoothly. "Honestly, this is the easiest route for everyone." I finally reached for the folder and opened it. 3 pages in, I stopped. My hands didn't shake. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. "This isn't a transfer," I said. Alan leaned forward. "What do you mean?" I held up the papers. "This is a trust assignment. The house isn't mine. It's being placed in a living trust, managed by both you and Cynthia, with me listed as a beneficiary, not the owner." A pause thickened in the room like fog rolling in from the sea. Alan looked confused, as if he hadn't actually read what he'd brought. Cynthia, however, went pale, not the embarrassed kind of pale, the frightened kind. I looked directly at her. "Did you think I wouldn't read it?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her hand dropped from Alan's shoulder. Alan swallowed. "We thought this would be best. So it stays in the family, in your family," I corrected. "Which part of that includes me?" The room fell silent. "I want you to take this back," I said calmly. "Tear it up. Come back when you're ready to be honest with me." "Mom," Alan began, but Cynthia pulled at his arm. "We need to go," she said, voice tight. "We're late already." They left the folder on the table. I stood there alone. The documents spread out like a betrayal written in legalese. Outside, the wind picked up, sending dry leaves scattering across the lawn. I had seen this coming, though I'd never wanted to admit it, not from my son. But something else stirred inside me, to something I hadn't felt in a long while. Resolve. If they thought I was too old to fight back, they were wrong. If they believed I didn't know what this house meant, they had no idea what I was willing to do to protect it. And if Cynthia thought she'd silenced me, she was about to learn how loud I could be. The morning after Alan and Cynthia left, I sat in the very same spot by the kitchen window, watching the sunrise pour light over my garden. It should have brought peace. It should have reminded me of all the years I spent raising my son, tending to him like I tended the roses below. but my heart was as restless as the wind rustling the ivy. The documents still sat on the table, their bold signatures mocking me. Everything in me told me not to trust what I'd been given. I had learned long ago, after Richard's passing, that people often use sentiment to cover deception. And Cynthia had sentiment wrapped around every one of her schemes like a velvet ribbon. Alan didn't see it, or maybe he chose not to. That hurt more. I decided I needed to go see the house. I couldn't sit with a question clawing at my stomach. I needed to breathe the lake air, see the house with my own eyes, touch its walls, feel its truth. I packed lightly. Just enough for a night or two. My old green suitcase, the same one Richard bought me on our 20th anniversary, the handle still worn from our summer road trips. I fed the cat, locked the door, and climbed into my car. As I backed out of the driveway, I kept glancing at the envelope on the passenger seat. It was a bright, cloudless day, but the road ahead felt shadowed. Familiar trees blurred past as memories started flowing with every mile. Alan as a boy, pressing his nose to the backseat window asking, "Are we there yet?" Richard pulling over to teach him how to skip stones in the lake, evenings on the porch, music from the radio blending with the sound of frogs and laughter. But as I neared Mirror Lake, unease settled deeper in my chest. There was a heaviness in the air, like something sacred had been disturbed. When I turned onto the gravel drive, my heart stalled. There was a silver SUV parked in front of the house. That wasn't my car. That wasn't Alan's either. I pulled in behind it and my foot hesitated on the brake. Toys littered the lawn. A small tricycle tipped on its side by the porch. Smoke drifted lazily from the chimney. Someone was home. Someone who wasn't supposed to be. I sat for a long minute, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. Then, slowly, I got out. My feet crunched on the gravel as I walked toward the porch steps. The door looked the same. The wreath I'd hung 3 years ago in autumn colors was gone. In its place hung a generic welcome sign. I knocked. A woman answered. She looked to be in her 30s, hair pulled back in a messy bun, a toddler perched on her hip. Her eyes were wary, but not unfriendly. "Can I help you?" she asked. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Yes, I think there may be a misunderstanding. This is my house." She blinked. "Your house?" "I'm sorry, ma'am, we've been living here since January. We have a lease agreement." My breath caught. "A lease from whom?" "Alan Rivers," she said without hesitation. "He said he owned the property." My stomach twisted. "I'm Judith Rivers. I'm his mother." Now her eyes widened. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know." I looked past her shoulder into the living room. My sofa was gone. The fireplace mantel held photos I didn't recognize. Nothing inside looked like it belonged to me anymore. "I'm not here to cause trouble," I said quietly. "I just need to understand what's happening." She opened the door wider. "Would you like to come in?" I hesitated only a second. Then I stepped inside. The house smelled different: cinnamon, diapers, detergent, but under that, the old wood still held its familiar scent. I noticed the walls had been painted a lighter shade. The furniture was newer, store-bought, impersonal, yet the bones of the house were the same. My fingers grazed the edge of the hallway, recalling the spot Alan used to run his hand over as a boy, claiming it helped him balance. I noticed it was freshly patched and painted over. We sat in the kitchen, a room I once called my sanctuary. The young woman, whose name I learned was Meredith, set her son down with a snack and poured me tea. She pulled out the lease and showed it to me. It was official, legally binding, signed by Alan. Dated for months ago. He said it was his family summer home. Meredith explained. He told us his mother no longer used it and he didn't want it to sit vacant. We were thrilled to rent it. It's beautiful. My hands trembled as I set the tea down. Did he say anything else? Anything about transferring the property? She looked apologetic. He said he inherited it. I left after an hour, numb. Meredith was kind. I didn't blame her. She'd been caught in the same web I had, just on a different thread. As I drove back, I didn't cry. I felt something colder, then sadness, something steelier. Anger simmered under my skin, but it was contained. I had to stay clear, stay sharp. When I got home, I placed the lease copy she gave me beside the fake deed Alan had delivered. Then I made a call, not to Alan, not yet. I called Diane, my closest friend and former paralegal at Richard's law firm. She knew how to read through deception like it was written in bold print. "Can you come over?" I asked. "I'll be there in 30. I'll be there in 30. When she arrived, I told her everything. She read both documents. Her brow furrowed the deeper she went. "This isn't a deed," she said, tapping the paper Alan had given me. "This is a transfer agreement. It says they're initiating a trust that might result in the house being transferred. But nothing's actually been filed with the county. It's smoke and mirrors." I stared at the page, the betrayal wrapping tighter around my lungs. "He lied to me," Diane nodded grimly, "and probably to that tenant family too, Judith. He never gave you ownership, not officially. It's all in his name." That night, I didn't sleep. I walked the halls of my modest home, the one Alan said was too small and outdated. I looked at the photos on the mantel, me and Richard. Our wedding day, Alan, age 6, dressed as a pirate. The three of us at the lake house, the summer before Richard got sick. I thought of all the birthdays, all the times I bailed Alan out of financial messes, co-signed loans, took care of him when no one else would, and he had lied, not just to me, he'd erased me from the legacy I had built with Richard, handed over our sanctuary to strangers, not even with the honesty to say he didn't care. No, he wrapped it in ribbon, handed me lies, and smiled as though he'd given me a gift. I sat down with a notebook and pen and started to write everything down: dates, conversations, hunches. Because now I wasn't just a mother who'd been lied to, I was a woman with a plan, and if Alan thought I was going to quietly sip tea and accept it, he'd forgotten who raised him. The kettle screamed just as my thoughts did, a sharp, piercing cry that snapped me out of my daze. I turned off the stove, poured the boiling water over the tea bag, and watched as the color slowly bled into the mug. It was always the small things, the smell of bergamot, the clink of porcelain, that anchored me, and yet, this morning, everything felt unmoored. I couldn't stop thinking about the cabinet, the one in the den, the one that had stayed locked for years. Gerald had installed it himself when Alan was a toddler. He kept all the important papers there, our wills, property documents, saving certificates, and eventually, he handed me the key, saying, "You're the memory now, Jude, just in case," for years. I never needed it. Until now. I stood up, careful with my knees, and patted across the floor. The old oak groaned beneath my slippers. The den looked just the way Gerald had left it. Books alphabetized, his reading glasses still sitting crookedly on the arm of his leather recliner. And the locked cabinet tucked in the far right corner, under the painting of the lake. I reached into the drawer of the desk and pulled out the small brass key. Cool and familiar in my palm, my fingers hesitated at the cabinet's edge. My heart beat faster than it should. I wasn't even sure what I was expecting to find, confirmation or contradiction. The key slid in with a soft click, and I turned it slowly, hearing the latch release. Inside was a single green folder marked property and title Mirror Lake. My throat tightened. I carried it to the kitchen table, sitting down as if I were bracing myself for impact. Opening it, I found several pages. The original deed signed by Gerald in 1989, our joint ownership filings, and an update in 2015 when we'd placed the house in a living trust, naming me as the sole beneficiary. But the final document made my stomach drop. It was a letter, unsigned, typed but with corrections scribbled in blue ink. Gerald's handwriting. He must have been drafting it shortly before his passing. It was addressed to Alan. "Alan, I know this place means the world to you, but it belongs to your mother when I'm gone. You must protect it for her, not for profit, not for convenience, for love. She gave everything to this family. The least we can do is make sure she keeps the one place that gave her peace." I closed the folder and sat in silence. So then why was Alan lying? Why did he show up with fake transfer papers? And more importantly, why did Cynthia flinch when I challenged them? Something deeper was going on, something they were afraid I'd find out. The next morning, I called our family lawyer, Richard Dalloway. He'd handled Gerald's estate. He was nearing retirement now, but his mind was sharp as ever. "Judith, it's been a while," he said kindly. "What can I do for you?" "I need to know if my son made any legal filings regarding the lake house." A pause. "I'd need to check the registry database, but to my knowledge, the title remained unchanged after your husband's passing. You're the named sole beneficiary." "Why?" I told him everything. The visit, the envelope, the strange hesitance in Alan's voice, Cynthia's fake smile. "I'll dig into it right away," he said, "and I'll call you back before noon." When he did, his tone had changed. "Judith, there's something wrong." The title had been changed. Not legally, no new deed had been registered, but someone had attempted to file a quitclaim deed last month. It had been rejected due to incorrect notary information, the names on that attempted filing, Alan and Cynthia, trying to transfer the property from me to Cynthia's brother. I felt the blood drain from my face. They forged it, I whispered. Yes, Richard replied carefully. And they tried to cover it by presenting you with false documents. If they try again, they might correct the errors and succeed unless we block it. My mind raced. I wasn't dealing with a simple misunderstanding. This was fraud, and it was being orchestrated by the two people I'd loved and trusted, one by birth, one by marriage. Later that evening, I sat with a pen and a blank sheet of paper in front of me. I stared at it for what felt like hours. Then I began to write, not to Alan, not to Cynthia, but to myself. I wrote down everything I remembered, every instance where Cynthia had subtly undermined me, suggesting home care when I'd sprained my ankle, telling Alan I was slipping when I forgot my pharmacy appointment, offering to handle the bills after Gerald died, all of it, every manipulation, every sideways glance, every moment I ignored, thinking I was being paranoid. And Alan, my sweet boy, who used to pick wildflowers for me after church, he had changed, but had he changed? Or had I simply refused to see what he'd become? The next day, I did what I should have done years ago. I made an appointment with a new estate attorney. I wanted a will that protected everything. I wanted the lake house placed in a trust with specific clauses blocking any transfer without my express notarized consent. I wanted power of attorney reissued not to Alan but to someone else. I wanted locks changed, security updated. I wasn't going to sit by and let them rob me of the one place that held my heart. I wasn't just protecting property. I was protecting memory, love, legacy. And something else I hadn't felt in years. Myself. It started with a text message, just 3 words, dinner this Saturday. Alan rarely reached out anymore unless he needed something. So, the message felt suspiciously out of character. After the fraudulent quitclaim deed incident, which I still hadn't confronted him about, I knew better than to assume he was coming from a place of goodwill. But I also knew something else. If I was ever going to get the full truth out of him, I needed to keep him close. So I replied, sure, 7 p.m. His response came fast, perfect, Cynthia's cooking. The mention of her name knotted something in my stomach. I stood at the kitchen sink, staring at the lake through the window. Its reflection was soft and rippling, as if nothing bad could ever happen in a place so still. But stillness doesn't mean safety. It only means what's buried hasn't risen to the surface yet. I arrived at their house Saturday evening wearing the sapphire cardigan Gerald had given me on our 30th anniversary. It was old but warm, familiar. I needed its comfort like armor. Cynthia opened the door, beaming in that practiced way of hers, her teeth white, her eyes not quite matching the expression. She leaned in for a hug that never touched her chest. You look lovely, she said. Is that the sweater Gerald bought you? I nodded. She remembered. It's always been one of my favorites, she added. That shade of blue suits you. I could feel the hollowness in her words. To polished, to prepared. Alan emerged from the hallway in a pressed shirt, holding a bottle of wine. Mom, he said with a tight smile, I'm glad you could come. There was a flicker of something in his voice, nervousness, guilt, or was I projecting? I followed them into the dining room, where a table was set for four. I hesitated, then I heard footsteps behind me. A man I didn't recognize walked in, tucking his phone into his pocket. Mom, Alan said, this is Marcus, Cynthia's brother. Of course it was, the same Marcus who was named in the fraudulent quitclaim filing. He smiled too easily. Nice to finally meet you, Mrs. Hale, he said. I shook his hand. It was warm but overly firm, like someone trying to dominate a handshake, rather than offer it. Dinner was quiet at first. Cynthia served chicken marsala and some kind of roasted squash dish that I barely touched. I was too focused on watching them, the glances between Cynthia and Marcus, the way Alan kept fidgeting with his wine glass, the unnatural cheeriness in the room, like we were all pretending not to feel the electric tension underneath. It was Marcus who brought it up. So, Judith, he said, slicing his chicken, have you given any more thought to relocating? The lake house is beautiful, but it must be a lot to manage on your own. Alan coughed. Cynthia glanced up, her fork pausing mid-air. I smiled, slow and deliberate. I've managed it for over 3 decades. It's no trouble. It's no trouble. I just mean, Marcus continued, It might make sense to consider downsizing, cash in, enjoy the money, travel, maybe move closer to the city. Get something more manageable. Alan cleared his throat. I'm not selling the house, I said. Cynthia jumped in. No one's saying that, Judith. We're just thinking long term, what makes sense for your future. We only want what's best for you. I set my fork down carefully. I think we should stop pretending, I said. Let's stop with the small talk and talk about the real reason I was invited here. All three froze. Alan, I said calmly. Tell me why you tried to file a forged quitclaim deed with Marcus's name on it. His face went white. Cynthia dropped her fork. Marcus actually leaned back in his chair, hands up like he wasn't involved. Mom. I don't know what you're talking about, Alan stammered. I spoke with Richard. He showed me the attempted filing. It was rejected due to errors, but your names were on it. You tried to give away my house to someone who isn't even family. Cynthia cut in, her voice sharper than before. It was a mistake. I turned to her. A mistake, yes, she said, recovering. We misunderstood the paperwork. Alan thought the property was already part of an informal trust. Don't lie to me, I snapped. I stood up, chair scraping against the floor. I saw Gerald's letter, the deed, the trust documents. You knew exactly what you were doing. You thought I wouldn't notice if you slipped it through with bad paperwork. You wanted the house for Marcus, didn't you? Marcus opened his mouth, then shut it again. Alan looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. You were going to steal the only thing I had left of my husband, I said, voice trembling. And for what? A favor to your in-laws, some investment, scam, or were you just hoping I'd be too old to notice? The silence that followed was thick with guilt. Finally, Alan whispered. We thought it would be better if the house was in someone's hands who could do more with it. More than hold the memories of an entire family, I asked. More than honor the love that built it. You mean more profitable? Cynthia stood now too. This is getting out of hand, Judith. You're twisting everything. You've been unwell since Gerald passed. I'm not unwell, I said, lifting my chin. I'm wide awake now, and you two should be very careful, because what you've done, it borders on elder fraud. Her face dropped. Alan looked stunned. I walked to the door, calm and clear. Don't ever invite me to another fake dinner. Again, as I stepped into the night air, I felt the heat of their shame trailing behind me. I could hear the door close, muffling whatever excuses they were about to make. But I didn't care anymore. They weren't my responsibility now. I was finally standing up for myself. And they would never see me the same way again. I didn't sleep. That night. After the dinner, I returned to my home, the home they tried to steal, and sat in the kitchen with Gerald's old thermos of chamomile tea, staring at the clock as the hours passed. The house was quiet, but my thoughts were not. They ran in circles, picking apart every word Alan and Cynthia had said. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the betrayal itself, or how effortlessly they tried to disguise it as care. By morning, the decision was made. I pulled out my notebook, the one with Gerald's initials on the corner, and wrote 3 names, Alan, Cynthia, Marcus. Then I crossed out all 3. It was time to fix everything. Properly, legally, permanently. My appointment with Richard, the family attorney, was at 10 a.m. He had been our lawyer for nearly 25 years. Gerald trusted him, and I still believed he was one of the few people who hadn't changed once money started circling like vultures. He greeted me with a gentle smile and gestured toward the familiar leather chair across his desk. You've had quite a week, I imagine, he said, settling in. Longer than that, I replied, but yes, it's time to make everything official. He opened a folder labeled Hale Family Trust and placed it gently between us. I've already reviewed the attempted quitclaim. You're right. Of course it was fraudulent. Alan and Marcus tried to process it, but it was rejected by the county clerk because the signatures didn't match. It's a criminal matter, Judith. I nodded. I don't want to press charges, not yet, but I do want to remove Alan from any part of the trust. That includes the will. Richard's brow lifted. That's a serious step. He took a serious risk. I replied. He gambled our memories, Gerald's legacy, and my trust. He doesn't deserve a single board of this house. He hesitated, then slid over a fresh file. I can help you restructure the estate, he said. Do you have anyone in mind to become the new beneficiary? I paused. That was the hard part. I had no other children, no grandchildren, no siblings still alive. The list of people who had loved me simply for me had grown thinner every year. I don't know yet, I said softly, but I know who it can't be. He began drafting new documents. With each click of his keyboard, I felt the weight of old guilt lifting. I wasn't doing this out of anger. I was doing it to preserve what was mine, what Gerald had left in my hands, what we had built with patience and sacrifice. I signed the new trust documents with a steady hand. When he pushed the new will forward, he looked at me carefully. "Judith, if you do this, there's no going back. It's not just a statement. It's a wall they can't climb over." "Good," I said. "I want them to feel what it's like to be shut out." That evening, I returned home to an empty voicemail and no missed calls. No apology. No explanation. Nothing. I stood at the edge of the lake as the sun began to dip behind the trees. The reflection of the house dancing in the water. Gerald always said the view is best in August. The colors were soft, golden, and warm like the ending of a song you never wanted to end. I whispered, "It's still mine, Gerald," and for the first time in months, I felt him. Not in a supernatural way, but in the quiet calm that settled in my chest. 2 days later, Alan showed up. He didn't call ahead, just appeared on the porch like a man who had finally realized the ground was slipping beneath him. I opened the door slowly, not letting him in. "Mom," he said, his voice hoarse, "please, can we talk?" I stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind me. "I already said what I needed to say at dinner." "I didn't know," he started. "Marcus, he told me it was just a technicality, that the house was already part of the family trust. I didn't think it would matter." "Alan, you filed a forged deed. That's not a technicality, that's fraud, and even if you had believed it, you didn't tell me. You tried to go behind my back." He looked down at the floorboards. "I panicked," he said. "The business has been bad. We needed liquidity. I thought maybe if Marcus held the property for a while we could flip it and reinvest." I stared at him. "So you used your father's gift, our family's history, to dig yourself out of debt?" He looked up, red-eyed. "I didn't mean for it to go that far, Cynthia," she pushed. "She said you didn't really use the house anymore, that maybe it was time to move on." I crossed my arms. "Well, I have moved on." His brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I've updated the trust. You're no longer part of it." His face fell. "You disinherited me?" "Yes," I said. "I had to. I don't trust you, and I won't reward betrayal with inheritance." "Mom," he whispered, "I'm your only son. And you treated me like I was already dead." The silence between us felt endless. Finally, he turned and walked to his car. As he reached the door, he said over his shoulder, "You'll regret this." I didn't respond. I just watched him drive away. That night, I lit the old lantern Gerald had installed on the back porch, the same one that used to guide us home after long walks down by the dock. Its light flickered against the trees. I felt alone, but I also felt free. There would be more pain ahead. I was sure of that, but at least I knew I had taken control of my own story. No one else would write it for me again. And the house, it stood behind me, stronger than ever. Mine, still mine. Forever mine, forever mine. The attic hadn't been opened in years. The ladder creaked under my weight as I climbed up, brushing cobwebs out of the way with one hand, holding a flashlight in the other. Dust coated everything. The air was thick and still, filled with the smell of old wood, forgotten paper, and time. I hadn't been up here since Gerald died. Funny how we avoid places where memories might be too loud or too quiet. The air shifted when I pushed the attic door open. A breeze from the ventilation rustled the yellowing newspaper that lined the walls and shelves. The light from my flashlight landed on the boxes, one after another, like small coffins holding moments I had once lived and shelved. But I knew exactly which one I had come for. Back in the corner, behind old Christmas decorations and a suitcase full of worn-out sweaters, sat a cedar box marked Judith, personal. I crouched beside it, brushing off a thick layer of dust. The latch clicked open with a stubborn tug. Inside were pieces of a life, letters from Gerald, tied with a green ribbon. Photographs of our wedding day, our early vacations, our first Christmas in the lake house, my son's baby booties, a ticket stub from our honeymoon ferry to the San Juan Islands, and a smaller envelope addressed to me, one I didn't remember. I opened it carefully. It was from Gerald. "Judith, if you're reading this, then something's gone wrong. Maybe not a tragedy, maybe just a storm. I left this letter here because you always said you wanted to be the one who held things together. I trust you to do that, but I also trust you to know when to let go. This house, it's more than walls and windows, it's us. Our fights, our laughter, our burnt toast mornings, it belongs to you. no matter what happens next. Don't let anyone rewrite the story of what we built, love always. Gerald, I pressed the paper to my chest. Tears came slowly, not violently, just soft and full, not just for the betrayal Alan had inflicted, but for the man who had once made me feel so safe that I forgot betrayal was even possible. Later that night, I lit a fire in the living room and spread the contents of the box around me, a private museum, just for me, photos, receipts, scribbled grocery lists that once lived on our fridge, even Gerald's old business card from the furniture shop we ran in our younger years. And I found something else, tucked into the folds of an old journal, the original deed to the beach house, signed, dated, witnessed. His name, and mine. No one else's. I felt a sense of righteous closure settle into my bones. This house was not up for discussion. The next morning, Cynthia came, not Alan, just her. She stood on the porch in heels, a crisp blouse, and her usual tight smile. I opened the door just wide enough to show her she wasn't welcome. I'm not here to argue, she said, her voice clipped. I just want to talk. I don't think we have much to say. Please, Judith. Her voice dropped a little. I came alone. Doesn't that count for something? I opened the screen door but didn't invite her in. She glanced around. At the porch furniture, Gerald's chair was still there, the one he carved with his initials during a lazy summer afternoon. I always liked this house, she said, her tone a little too familiar. I could see the kids running around here. Someday? You mean Marcus's kids? I asked pointedly. Her lips twitched. Not quite a smile. That was the plan, we thought. Once things settled down, it would be good for everyone. Alan and I could manage the property. We could airbin it for extra income, turn it into a business. I asked, folding my arms. She didn't answer. Did you really think you could just take something that didn't belong to you? I asked. She tried to soften her voice. Alan said you were getting tired, that you didn't want the stress anymore. My eyes locked on hers. He was wrong. She shifted her weight, clearly uneasy. I'm pregnant, she said suddenly. My chest tightened. She looked down at her stomach. Just a hint of a bump visible under her blouse. And you think that changes what you did? I asked. I think it changes everything, she replied. This child is your grandchild. I didn't say anything for a long moment. Then I said quietly, and how do you plan to tell them how you tried to steal their great-grandfather's house before they were even born? She flushed. I came here because I wanted to try to find some middle ground. There's no middle ground between theft and trust. She looked genuinely angry now. You're punishing a whole family because of one mistake. I shook my head. No, Cynthia, I'm setting boundaries. You crossed them, and now you live with the consequences. I'll fight it. She snapped. If you think I won't challenge the trust, you're wrong. We'll take it to court. Then I hope you have good lawyers, I said calmly. Because I have more than you ever knew, including signed statements, witness affidavits, and original property records and Gerald's letters. He was very specific. She paled. Gerald always scared her a little, even in death. He still did. She left without another word. That night, I pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began writing a letter. Not to Alan, not to Cynthia, but to the unborn child she carried. To my grandchild. I don't know you yet. I may not be here when you read this, but you deserve to know who your family was. You deserve to know about this house, what it meant, what it stood for, and how hard your great-grandfather and I worked to keep it safe. Love isn't always soft. Sometimes it means protecting what's right, even from your own blood. If you ever come here someday, I hope you feel the weight of that love in the floors, in the walls, in the lake breeze. This house is not just a home, it's a legacy, and one day, maybe it will be yours. I folded the letter, tucked it back into the cedar box, and returned it to the attic. Some treasures are meant to be found at the right time. It was a quiet Sunday morning when I decided to host the meeting. Not a dinner, not a reunion, a meeting. The word itself carried weight, purpose, seriousness. I sent the message to Alan, his wife Cynthia, my niece Rebecca, who was now handling my legal paperwork, and to Marcus, my younger son, who had wisely kept his distance. Throughout this mess, the message was short and clear. Sunday at 2 p.m. I have something important to say about the house. Everyone who has a stake or thinks they do should be there. Mom, I didn't wait for confirmation. Instead, I made coffee that morning with a strange steadiness in my hands. Not the trembling anger that had visited me weeks ago, or the foggy confusion I had when Alan first claimed he took care of the paperwork. This was different. This was purpose. I laid out the dining room table with fresh white linen, not fancy, just clean. I placed a pitcher of lemon water, a few plates of snack salmon cookies, roasted cashews, and some cheese. My hands moved without hesitation. I was no longer performing the role of mother or hostess. I was defending my name, my legacy, my truth. At 2:05 p.m., the doorbell rang. I let them all in, one by one. Alan arrived first. In a navy blue polo, trying to look casual, but I saw the stiffness in his jaw. Cynthia clung to his arm like a vine wrapping around a decaying tree. Marcus came next, more cautious, his hands in his pockets, and Rebecca, sweet Rebecca, came with a notepad and a laptop, looking more like a lawyer every day. We sat down, silence pressed around us like fog. I could almost hear the tick of the old wall clock above the fireplace. Alan broke the silence. First, so Mom, you wanted to talk. Cynthia folded her arms tightly. I nodded. Yes, about the beach house. Cynthia smiled tightly, rehearsed. We're glad you're finally ready to have that conversation. Maybe now we can all reach some sort of resolution. Rebecca glanced up from her notes, but I raised a hand to stop her from speaking. No, Cynthia, this isn't a negotiation. This is a declaration. Her smile faltered. Alan leaned back, pretending to be relaxed. We told you. The deed was filed. We transferred ownership to you months ago. You just haven't checked with the county. You keep saying it didn't happen, but we did everything right. I looked him in the eye. I did check with the county, and you're right, there was a document submitted, but it was invalid. There was no legal transfer. In fact, what you filed was unsigned, unnotarized, and full of incorrect information, and it never included my signature, the current title holder. Alan's jaw twitched. Rebecca cut him off. Opening her laptop, she's right. I ran the records myself. There's no official transfer on file. But worse than that, Alan, what you and your wife attempted is legally questionable at best, fraudulent at worst. Cynthia's face flushed a blotchy red. That's ridiculous, she spat. We were just trying to help. You've been overwhelmed. Judith, you said yourself you didn't want to handle maintenance anymore. And so you decided, I said slowly, to take what wasn't yours. Alan's voice rose. We were trying to secure the house before it ended up in probate. Or before you did something irrational with it. You're not getting any younger. Mom, this was for the family. The family. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You mean your family. You wanted to hand my home to Cynthia's side. Didn't you? Your in-laws who've never lifted a finger to paint a wall or clean a gutter here. The ones who suddenly had ideas for remodeling. For urban listings, for turning this house into a cash machine. Alan went silent. Cynthia looked like she might cry, but I saw no sorrow in her face, only calculation. I turned to Marcus. He cleared his throat. I told them not to do it, Mom. I told them to leave the house alone. I didn't want to be involved in this. I just didn't want to get between you all. You didn't get between us, Marcus, I said, my voice gentler. You just stayed out of a fire while I burned. The room fell silent again. Then I opened a folder, one by one. I laid out copies of the original deed, Gerald's will, my trust documents, the photographs even. Gerald's handwritten letter, and finally, the letter I had written to Cynthia's unborn child. I pushed it across the table. I want you to read that when you get home, I said quietly. Cynthia didn't touch it. Rebecca stood. For the record, she said, we've prepared legal documents securing the beach house under my aunt's living trust. There is no room for ambiguity. Any further attempts to seize, rent out, or claim rights over the property without Judith's permission will result in civil action. Alan looked stunned. This is insane, he whispered. You're turning everyone against me. No, I replied. You did that on your own. I'm just choosing not to protect you from the consequences anymore. After they left, I stood on the porch. The wind had picked up from the lake, rustling the trees in soft whispers. The sunlight made the water shimmer gold and blue, like a painting I once saw in Paris. Marcus lingered behind. He looked at me with uncertainty. You really meant all of that? I nodded. I should have said something sooner, he said. I saw how Cynthia treated you, how Alan let it happen. You don't have to apologize, I said. You're not the one who tried to erase me. He looked down at the letter I had given them. Do you think they'll ever understand? No, I said, not bitter, just honest. But it's not my job to make them. He nodded, quietly. And then, to my surprise, he hugged me tightly, as if something in him had finally broken open. I'm proud of you, Mom, he whispered. Tears welled up, but I blinked them away. I'm proud of me too. A week had passed since the family meeting. A week of stillness. No calls, no messages. I had expected Alan to come storming back, perhaps with a letter from a lawyer or one of his long-winded lectures about what Dad would have wanted, but he didn't. He disappeared into silence. Cynthia too. I imagined her pacing in their kitchen, crafting 1,000 rebuttals, or worse, spinning stories for her parents about how I had lost my mind. That was her gift, after all, playing victim in situations she created herself. But silence, I was learning, was not peace. It was the space where memories echoed the loudest. I spent that week walking barefoot on the beach in the early mornings. Feeling the sand cool between my toes, I reread Gerald's old journal entries. I sat in our bedroom, now only mine, tracing the carvings he once made into the windowsill. A tiny heart, our initials inside. It should have brought comfort. But it only deepened the ache, because even though I had reclaimed my house, on paper, in court, in front of them all, what I hadn't reclaimed was my sense of home. They had cracked it. Even Marcus, who meant well, had let the fracture grow too long before trying to mend it. Then on a rainy Thursday afternoon, there was a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Rebecca had emailed the night before, and Marcus had promised to come by Sunday. My neighbor Diane usually just let herself in after calling. This knock was hesitant, unfamiliar. I opened the door slowly, and there she stood. Not Cynthia, but her mother. Marlene. A woman I had only met twice. Once at the wedding, where she barely acknowledged me, and once at a birthday party for her granddaughter, where she had referred to my home as quaint. She stood there now in a long beige coat, holding a small purse, her eyes guarded. May I come in? She asked. I didn't answer for a full 10 seconds, not out of rudeness, but calculation. She seemed smaller than I remembered. Or maybe it was that I was finally standing taller. I stepped aside. You've already taken the tour, haven't you? But sure, come in. She gave a tight smile and stepped across the threshold, her heels making no sound on the polished floor. I wanted to speak with you privately, she began. I gestured toward the armchairs near the window. But I didn't sit. She did. I watched her take in the room, the framed photo of Gerald and me, the bookshelf, the coastal painting above the mantel. She seemed to catalog everything like a realtor showing a property. This house, she said softly, is lovely. It's no wonder you're so protective over it. I folded my arms. Is that why you came? To admire the wallpaper? No, she said. I came because things have become tense. Cynthia is very upset, Alan too. Good, that means they still have feelings. Marlene exhaled through her nose, a tight expression crossing her face. Look, she said, I know how things must have appeared, but you need to understand. Alan told us you were ready to let go of the house, that you were overwhelmed and looking to downsize. We were under the impression it was a mutual decision. I raised an eyebrow, so mutual that I didn't know about it. She hesitated. We may have moved a little fast, but we had plans. My husband was going to renovate the guest rooms. Cynthia was setting up a booking calendar. It was going to be a family investment. Your family? Marlene's silence confirmed it. That's the part you never really saw, did you? I continued. From the moment Cynthia married my son, you assumed we were interchangeable, that our histories, our grief, our names on deeds, they were just technicalities to work around. You saw this house as a stepping stone, a tool. It was never meant to be like this. She murmured. No, I said. It wasn't, but the moment Alan started lying to me, the moment Cynthia tried to manipulate legal documents, the moment you stepped in like a vulture circling something that wasn't even dead yet, it became exactly what you made it. Marlene looked away. I came today, she said slowly, because Cynthia is pregnant. My heart paused. I sat down without meaning to. She's pregnant, I echoed. She nodded. 3 months. They were going to announce it next month, but with all the tension, they've delayed. I swallowed hard. It was news I hadn't expected, a grandchild, new life in the middle of so much pain. They were hoping this house would become a place to raise the baby, a beach home, a sanctuary. I shook my head. You don't start a sanctuary by stealing it from someone else. Marlene reached into her purse and pulled out a small white envelope. What is that? It's a letter, she said, from Cynthia. She couldn't bring herself to face you yet. She asked me to deliver this. I didn't take it. Not at first. Then slowly, reluctantly. I reached out and held the envelope in my palm. It felt Heavy, considering how light it was. I'll read it when I'm ready. Marlene nodded and stood. I hope you'll find a way to be part of the child's life. Despite all of this, I didn't answer. She walked out into the rain without another word. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea. The envelope lay unopened beside me. The rain tapped gently at the windows, a lullaby of uncertainty. I wanted to believe the letter held something meaningful, regret, an apology, but I had learned that hope, when wrapped in naivety, could be the cruelest thing of all. Still, I opened it. Cynthia's handwriting was neat, controlled. Judith, I know I should be saying this to your face, but I don't know how to look you in the eye after everything. I was wrong. Maybe not at first. I really did believe Alan was doing what you wanted, but somewhere along the way, I stopped questioning it. I got greedy. I got protective. I let my ambition get ahead of my respect for you. I know this won't fix anything, but I'm scared now, not of you, but of what we've become. Alan and I are having a baby, and I don't want our child growing up in a world where we took things we didn't earn. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But if there's room in your heart, one day, I hope we can talk, maybe not about houses or wills, or mistakes, maybe just about a child, and what it means to build something from love again. Cynthia, I read it 3 times. The words didn't erase what had been done, but they cracked something open in me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the tiniest seed of consideration. Could I be both strong and soft? Could I protect what's mine and make room for what's coming? I didn't know the answer yet, but I folded the letter and placed it in the top drawer of my nightstand, not to forget it, but to remember that even betrayal had layers. There's a photograph on my mantel. It's slightly faded, the frame worn at the corners from years of gentle dusting. Gerald stands behind me in it, arms loosely draped over my shoulders. His face resting just beside mine. We're barefoot on the deck, the ocean behind us, a glass of lemonade in my hand, and that rare, unforced smile on my lips. The kind you don't know you're making until someone captures it. I stared at it for a long time that morning. The sunlight through the living room windows painted a golden square across the floor, and in the silence, I could almost hear his laugh. I wondered what he'd think of all this, of the house nearly slipping from our hands, of our son's betrayal, of Cynthia's carefully worded apology, of me, holding onto a home like it was the last piece of myself. Would he have said, "Let it go, Jude, it's just a building"? Or would he have said, "Fight like hell, because you built this with your bare hands"? I don't know, but I do know this. That house wasn't just lumber and stucco and pretty curtains. It was a history, a record of laughter, grief, holidays, arguments, and forgiveness, and it was mine that morning. I got dressed, carefully, like I used to when Gerald and I would go out for Sunday brunch. Cream blouse, navy skirt, a string of pearls. I even applied lipstick. Not for vanity, for dignity. There was a knock at the door. I already knew who it was. "Hi, Mom," Marcus said, stepping inside. Carrying a brown paper bag. "I brought breakfast from that place you like, the one with the lemon scones." I smiled as he walked into the kitchen like he used to when he lived here, comfortable, like this space hadn't been haunted by courtrooms and betrayal. We sat at the table, and for a while, we just ate. He poured coffee, buttered scones, offered me the jam I liked. The silence was easy. Then he looked at me. "So Cynthia's letter." I nodded. "I read it and she's sorry, but it's layered, guilt and fear mostly, but there's something honest under it. Maybe even shame." He leaned back, watching me closely. "Do you believe her?" "I believe parts of her," I said, "and that's more than I could say before." He exhaled, rubbing his forehead. "I think Alan's spiraling. He hasn't been the same since the hearing, won't talk to me, barely talks to Cynthia." I sipped my coffee. "He needs to sit in what he did, not run from it." "I agree, but it's hard to watch your brother unravel." "I've been watching him unravel for years," I said softly. Marcus looked at me, and for once, didn't try to soften what I said. He nodded. Then he pulled something out of his pocket, a folded piece of paper. "What's that?" "I talked to a realtor I trust," he said, sliding it across the table. "These are some places closer to town, 1-bedroom condos, great views, easier upkeep." I stared at the list, then looked up at him. "You think I should sell?" He hesitated. "I think you should do what gives you peace. If this house feels like a fortress now, like something you're defending instead of living in, maybe it's time to imagine something different." Not because they tried to take it, but because you're choosing something else. I looked around at the walls, the light, the floors Gerald had stained himself, the carved initials, the memories. I used to love this house because it felt full, I whispered. Full of life, of voices, of meaning. Now I walk through the rooms, and I only hear what was almost lost. Then maybe it's time to fill it again, Marcus said gently with something new. On your terms. I thought about it all day after he left. Not about selling, not yet, but about choice. For so long the choices were made for me by grief, by Alan, by Cynthia's manipulation. But now I could choose. To rebuild trust. To hold boundaries. To forgive in fragments. To invite, or shut the door. That evening, I lit a fire in the living room, not because it was cold, but because I needed the comfort, the crackle, the warmth. I took the photograph from the mantel and held it in my lap. Gerald. I whispered, I wish you were here, but I know what you'd say. Don't let them change who you are. Jude, let what they did make you stronger, not smaller. I closed my eyes, then I got up, walked to the closet, and pulled out a wooden box I hadn't opened since he passed. Inside were the house plans we drew together, the journal he used when designing the garden, notes, sketches, and a letter addressed to me. I had read it once at the funeral, but this time the words felt new again. Jude, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone. And that's hard to imagine, because everything about this place, our home, has always been us. I want you to remember that the house was never just wood and walls. It was where you planted flowers and patience, where we built a life, where we learned each other, day by day. But if the house ever becomes too heavy to carry, too filled with echoes, don't let guilt keep you here. You're not trapped in this place, you made it. Which means you can choose what comes next. I love you, always. I sat there crying, but not in grief. In clarity. This house was mine, not because I had fought for it, but because I had lived in it. But what I chose to do with it next, that was no longer about Alan or Cynthia or even justice. It was about me. The sound of the key scraping against the lock was unfamiliar, not because the door was jammed, but because the key was new. I had the locks changed 2 days ago, quietly. No announcement, no drama, just a simple, firm step towards something I should have done a long time ago, reclaiming not just the house, but the power within it. I watched from the window as Alan jiggled the key again, frowning, confused. Cynthia stood a few feet behind him, arms folded, her expression unreadable. Eventually, Alan rang the doorbell. I didn't hurry. I walked calmly through the hallway that once echoed with children's footsteps, past the staircase where I used to hang birthday banners and tie balloons. I opened the door and stood, quietly looking into the eyes of the son I had raised, and almost lost. Mom, Alan said, the key's not working. I know, I replied. A beat passed. Then another. He blinked, clearly caught off guard. Did you change the locks? Yes. Why? His voice was confused but already tipping toward anger. Why would you? I had to, I said calmly. It's my house. And after everything, I needed it to feel safe again. He laughed, short, sharp. Safe from me? I didn't answer that. I didn't have to. Cynthia stepped forward, eyes softer than usual. We came to apologize in person. The letter wasn't enough. We thought maybe we could sit down. I studied her. There was a tremor in her voice, a flicker of something real. But I wasn't here to be the mediator anymore. I'm not angry anymore, I said, but I am changed. And if we're going to have any kind of future together, it has to start with truth. Alan looked at me, jaw clenched. I told you I transferred the deed, and I told you, you didn't, I said firmly. You lied. You tried to take what wasn't yours. You stood in this very doorway and gaslight your own mother. Cynthia looked down at her shoes. Alan was silent. Do you want to know what Gerald said in the letter he left me? I asked, voice steady. He said not to let grief or guilt keep me trapped. He said I built this place, and I could choose what came next. Alan opened his mouth, then closed it again. I want a relationship with you, I continued, both of you, even, but it has to be on my terms. I will not be manipulated, I will not be shamed into silence, and I will not be used. Silence. Except for the breeze rustling the palm leaves outside. You changed, Alan said quietly. You used to forgive everything. No, I replied. I used to ignore everything. He looked up, and I saw it, the small, stunned realization. The recognition that the mother he thought would always bend had finally straightened her spine. Cynthia, to her credit, nodded slowly. We deserved that. I stepped back, holding the door but not fully opening it. You may come in, but only if you leave every excuse, every justification, and every entitlement out here." Alan hesitated. Then, with a deep breath, stepped forward. Empty-handed, they sat on the couch like guests in a stranger's home. And maybe, in a way, they were. We spoke for 2 hours. Not everything was said. Not everything was forgiven, but there was effort, honesty, a beginning. Later that evening, after they left, I walked out onto the deck with a cup of tea. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, the wind lifted strands of my hair, and the sun was dipping low, setting the waves on fire with gold. I had almost given this view away, almost handed over this piece for the illusion of family unity, but now, standing there, alone and whole, I realized something. I had already built everything I ever needed, and what I hadn't built yet I still could. A new version of family. One with boundaries and truth. One where love wasn't currency. It was choice. As the sky turned orange and the stars blinked to life, I whispered a quiet promise to myself. I would never again surrender myself to stay in someone else's story. This, my home, my life, my peace, was mine, and this time, I wasn't giving it away.